This is the new Icom IC-7760. This has been sent to me from Icom Australia. This is a demo unit that is currently doing the rounds around the world, and I was having a bit of a play around with it today and looking at some things. So what we're going to do is I'm going to show off some of those features, some of the connections that we've got on the back. We're going to do some tests and answer some questions that when this radio originally was released and announced at the Tokyo Ham Fair, some people had about it. So the best place to start here is on the back of the control head. So the IC-7760 comes with this RC-7760, which is a remote head that is separate from the main body RF deck of the radio. And you can see here that all of the control is sent over this Ethernet connection here, which is labeled RF deck, and we're going to go into that in a little bit more detail later on in this video about the different ways that you can connect the two together. There is an external display. This is a DVD connection. I know a lot of people have spoken about this and said this should be HDMI, but really to get a DVI to HDMI connection, it's not really that hard, and I've done that on my external screens and streaming cards and things. So at the end of the day, at least it's got an external display on it, which is a must with anything like this because it makes things so much easier to see, and it's pretty cool on your shack desk as well. There's two USB connections here. I think that this is obviously linked to this USB hub, USB type B connection here, which goes to the PC. I think you can connect in a keyboard, possibly a mouse. Might be wrong on that, but there's two USB connections and the USB-B there as well. So you've also got external keypad. Now, this radio didn't come with a manual, so I can't look up half of these things and give you a proper description of what they are. Some of them are available on other Icom radios as well, so you can have a look at those. So external keypad, these are 3.5mm jacks. Electronic key, probably a keyer. Send, so it's your send lines, inputs and outputs for the line connection. External speaker, so there are two independent speakers here in the top of the control head, and a DC in jack. This uses a 15 volt DC plug pack to power this head. The serial number on this one is 020000109. So I actually had a look in the menus of this, and the serial number actually says that, I don't know why it's got a 2 here, but it's got 109. So I'm not sure if there were what the model number was at the Tokyo Ham Fair. So on the top are the two independent speakers. So you can mix the audios in these speakers so that you've got sort of like kind of stereo, or you can have one receiver on one speaker and another receiver on another speaker as well. On the bottom of the radio, or the bottom of the control head, there isn't really too much to see. There are a couple of feet here, but it does come with this stand which you can prop the radio up on top of and hold it up in the air so that it is at a good sort of viewing angle, as you can see. There aren't any feet, or sorry, not feet, but extendable, the extendable metal piece that comes out that on most Icom radios that you'd be familiar with, at least not on this demo model. So at the moment I've got it powered off, and all I'm going to do is I'm going to plug in the power. I've disconnected the RF deck, so let's just plug that in and show you what happens when you power up the radio. So we power it up. Again, RF deck is not connected. It will boot up. Nothing will it won't be receiving anything. You won't hear anything. And you'll get this error that says the RF deck is not detected. Check the power of it and restart it. But what we can still do is we can still have a bit of a look around in the menus. You can still adjust some things. You can go into here, into the network. This is where you would go in and have a look at some stuff related to the RF deck, which we'll go into shortly. And I just wanted to show what happens when you don't have it connected. So we'll power that back down, and we'll have a look now at the RF deck. So just to give you some sort of scale of size, that is the size of it. It is the size of my workbench. I'm not exactly sure how it compares with the IC-PW2 power amplifier. I believe that they're roughly the same sizes. Let me go and get measuring tape so I can give you the dimensions of this thing. So without connectors or anything like that on the back, I'm just measuring it from the top of the chassis. It is 440 millimeters by 420 odd millimeters by 165 millimeters. It weighs a lot. I don't know the exact weight. It comes in a huge box, and yeah, if you're putting this anywhere, you'll need a little bit of room. So obviously the whole idea of this is remote operation to put it closer to your antennas. So you might need to think about that accordingly. The reason why it is so big though, that I will point out, is the thing that it is 200 watts, 100% duty cycle. So 100% duty cycle amplifier in this thing. So that's got some massive heat sinks in it. You've got 4 antenna ports, which is a step up from the 7760. 7760 has 2 main antenna ports, but this one has included an extra 2. You've also got a transverter here, connection. You've got an antenna input and a loop out antenna output. This is a receive antenna, so you've got 4 transmit capable antennas and receive, and then you've got 1 receive only, and you can also then, as I mentioned, you can loop that back out, receive antenna back out to something else. Obviously don't go looping it out into another transceiver or transmitter though. So that's more, you would connect an antenna into this that's a receive only, and then out to maybe an SDR or something like that. You've got a reference in, so you can GPS lock this using a 10 megahertz reference at minus 10 dBm maximum. The classic 4-pin tuner connection here for an external tuner, although I'm not quite sure why you want to, because it's got an internal tuner in it. Controller, so this is the LAN connection out to the RF head, the remote head. Then you've got a LAN connection. So you've got 2 connections here, 2 Ethernet connections. Now, this one I was wondering whether it would be like the IC-905, which basically puts power out and controls the remote head. It's not. This one is different. This is an actual network connection. It's not like any passive thing or anything. So you can connect it to your local area network and run your remote head over it. And we're going to do that later on in this video, and also remote this at another site. And I'm going to show if that actually works, because I haven't actually tried it, but it does work here on the local area network. So you've got the LAN, so this is for your remote control and for accessing the actual radio, like using RSBA1 and getting inputs and outputs over the LAN connection. So that's that one. You've got a remote 3.5 millimeter jack. You've got a key here as well. Your ALC and sends, your 2 accessory outputs. You've got a USB 3 connection here, USB 3B type connection, which is for the SDR output for HD SDR. Got a big ground lug, so you can connect that to your ground and earth it. And then it's got an inbuilt power supply just using a IEC jug plug here. So you've got your power control here too. So you don't need a power supply for this thing. So the first method that I want to call is the direct connection method. That is using the provided, I think it's just 3 meters RJ45 cable directly into the back of the RF deck and back into the controller. The RF deck won't power this, so you do need the separate power supply. It just won't turn on. So there's no PoE or anything over this. So plug the power supply in, turn it on. The radio will fire up, and within a few seconds you hear a couple of relays click and we're operating. The red light also turns to blue here on the RF deck, and we've got the radio. So let's just go through a bit of an overview of some of the features that I've played around with on this radio that I like, and also some of the things when you're setting this up that you might want to consider and think about. So here I am on 10 meters, and I've just been having a listen actually this morning. There's quite a few little weak signals here on the scope. The scope seems to be a little bit more responsive and reactive than the 7760 than the 7610 that I've got here in the shack. There's a couple of little differences that I noticed about it, just, you know, playing around and just having a little bit of a tweak with the settings and everything like that. The main difference with the 7760 is this little sub display, and that is clickable. You can do things on that, and we'll go through some of the functionality of that shortly. Going into the menu system, the menus are very much familiar to people who run Icom radios. It's the sort of 7300, 9700, 7610, 705, all of those radios use this type of menu system, so all of this is pretty familiar to people. The main exception with this radio, similarly to the 7610, is you have this extra antenna button where you can go and you can select your frequencies to default to an antenna memory so that you don't have to keep switching between antennas. You've got a default memory between different frequencies and all that sort of thing. So in the set menu, if you go into here, there are a couple of little differences in the menus that I'll go through that are specific to the 7760. DPD adjustment, that is the digital pre-distortion adjustment. You can go in here and you can set this up for the 7760 for the linked PW2 for the different voltages that you can see there. I don't have the PW2 in here, and I can't do this adjustment. The transmit on this particular unit has been disabled, so it's receive only for this demo because it's basically doing its world tour, and I guess they don't want people pressing the PTT when it's sitting on a demo table. As you can see, if I transmit, you can see that the scope is going up and down, but there's no RF output power. If I bring up the multifunction meter, no RF output power. So, yep, a demo model. So in network, there is two parts to network which are not sort of super clear at the moment. If you've ever used an Icom radio, usually it's just sort of this section which just has the information as regards the IP address range for just the radio. But in here, you can set an IP address for the LAN connection, which is the connection to the radio itself going to like RSB-A1 or something. You've got an IP address for the controller, which is this unit here. You've got an IP address for the RF deck, which is what it's connected to. And you've also got all of your other IP connections. Now at the moment I've got mine set to DHCP. It doesn't really matter because I've got a direct connection. So I don't need to set these IP addresses at the moment. There is an audio buffer size via LAN, which is set to mid. So I guess that this is due to any lag that you might have for the audio. There might be a slight delay potentially in setting it to a large buffer size. I just left it at mid. I haven't changed it. Seems to be working fine. I don't notice any difference. But there's a connection from different segment. And if you turn this on, what this does is this gives you the ability to go into the different segment settings, and you can set up the RF deck's IP range if it is sitting in another subnet. So for instance, if your network has, say, one subnet that sits on it with your controller on it, and then you've got your RF deck on another subnet, then you can set that up in here. It doesn't look like you can set it up for the controller. You would have to go up here and set the controller IP address, and then come down and set the RF deck IP address and set it that way. So of course you'll have to do some routing to make sure that both subnets can talk to each other, but it just gives you the ability to, I'm gathering that if you switch DHCP off and you go to try and change IP addresses in here, it's probably not going to work because you're going to have different gateways and things like that. For my setup, it's relatively simple. At the moment, again, it's just directly connected from the head to the RF deck, but when we go and connect it via the network, it'll be a lot different. So that's the network settings that are in here. It sort of looks a little bit complicated, but it's actually pretty straightforward. And all you really need to do is you just need to be able to make sure that the head and the controller can talk to one another on the same IP range, or an IP range that can talk between each other. Under display, there is the ability to turn on the external display. The resolution is still limited to 800 by 480 or 800 by 600. Still looks fine on a, say, like a 24-inch monitor or something like that. If I go into version, here's all of the firmware versions. It's up to date, I think, the latest. Somehow it's been disabled for transmit, so I'm not sure. It must be some special button press, but it is running the latest firmware. In here are all the MAC addresses. So there's the LAN MAC address, the controller MAC address, the RF deck MAC address, if you need to know what they are so that you can assign them, say, a static IP address in your router. Now, getting back to the overall radio operation, one thing that is very similar to the 7760, the 7610 is the dual knobs here for controlling the main and the sub bands there. It's still the same. Pretty much everything. There's a couple of little different changes, but most of the buttons here on the left are fairly similar to how they're laid out on the 7610. It's just when you get over to this side of the radio is when it changes a little bit. Let me just move that over so that we can see that a little bit better. They've done that so that they can put this little sub display in. What they've done is, compared to the 7610, they've removed a bunch of buttons that were up here for changing the ability to change between band easily, and what they've done is they've just got this sub display button which you press and you can bring up the ability to change your bands from there. You can also have a analog style S meter in here as well, and you can adjust what your meter shows on when you're transmitting, whether it's power, SWR, ALC, and you can also have the digital type display. I prefer this digital type display, and the way that I actually run my current 7610 is I press and hold the S meter and I get the multifunction meter down here. But if you're running a scope, it reduces the size of your spectrum scope to this big, which it's okay, but it's a little bit, annoying, and it would have been better if it was able to see the whole spectrum, this whole waterfall. I just like seeing all of these meters. I don't like just looking at one meter up here. I like to see all of the meters down the bottom here so I can see exactly what's going on with power, ALC, SWR, everything as I'm transmitting. So the ability to see this over here, I think, is really good. It means that I can run this as like that with my waterfall in full display, and then I can watch my meters on the right. I can also change that to look when I'm receiving. I can change to the little waterfall band scope here, the bandwidth scope, which this is really cool, and I'm going to share some things about this shortly, or I can go and change frequencies. So I really do like the ability to be able to customize the things on this little touchscreen. The multifunction knob has been moved up to the top here, and you click that and you get your meter here to be able to change various things. The RF output power is from 200 watts, as you can see there, all the way down to less than 2 watts. So you've got less than 2 watts or 2 watts. They're the lowest setting. So I'm not sure, again, what the RF output power is. I can't measure it because it won't transmit. Everything else is relatively the same there. I've also changed the spectrums, the waterfall here. I went into my menus and adjusted them according to how I like them. If you want to learn more about making your waterfall pop, then there will be a link up here in the cards and also in the description below for a video to watch after this one to give you a similar style of view, and just makes looking at things on the waterfall a lot easier to see. So it took me a little while. I had to figure out there was a way to change the color and the way that you've got your sub expanded filter display over here. If you go into the menu and then display, filter effect screen, if you go into here you can choose the waveform type, so it's either fill or you can have line, so you can either fill it in or not. You can also change the color, so at the moment it's a blue, that is the default. You can adjust this so that you can choose what you want. So there I've got a green. That only affects the waveform color though. I've been sort of playing around and I can't sort of figure out how, if at all, you can adjust the actual continuously scrolling waveform. This has some filters as similar as other Icom radios. You've got predetermined filters. You can change the pass bands here. You can adjust them up and down. What I really like though about this is the ability to be able to adjust the filter and actually see it over here as you're adjusting. So let me find a signal, and what we can do is we can show a bit of an example of this. Okay, here we go, 17 meters. So we've got a station here at the moment, and he's reasonably strong. He's about 5x5, which is good. So what we've got is we've got our filter here, and we can see what's going on. What we can do, we can set this up to a soft type of filter. And what I really like is you can really dial that in, and you can see there as we adjust it, we can adjust it as we need. So for instance, if we've got some sort of interference on the top end, we can take that out, and we can adjust the bottom end of our pass band so that we can really dial in that station. 28331. So say we were listening to a station here and we've got our birdie. We can see over here that we could see that interfering signal over here. So what we can do is we can press the manual notch button, and we can, the other thing we could do is we could just press the notch, automatic notch, right? And that's doing a, kind of an okay job. I can still see it, I can still hear it. But if we go into the manual and let's just press and hold, now we'll just set the width because it's a very small signal. Let's set that to narrow. And we've got our position meter up here. Let's just move the multifunction knob. You watch what happens over here. We can center in, right in on that birdie, and it's completely gone. It's still there on the waterfall, but in the audio, it's completely gone. So that's really helpful if you've got interfering signals right on not right on frequency, just adjacent off frequency that you're trying to listen to. And the other thing that might also be handy for is if you ever need to be able to notch out an adjacent station, if you're in a contest or the band's completely full, then you can also notch up and down. I don't think that there's multiple notch filters. I think there's only one single notch filter that you can put in. But in any case, that is very handy to be able to see it on this screen and adjust it accordingly. Okay, so I've shown the direct connection with the RF deck. So what we're going to do is we're going to power this off. And I'm simply going to just take that connection out, leave the power in. Here I've got a network connection that runs down to my switch in the cupboard there. You can see it's plugged in. So I'm just going to connect that in. So we're connected. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to disconnect out of the RF deck and take another connection here that goes via my switch. And they are on the same IP range. Plug it in, turn on, give it a sec. There we go. We're back online again. It took a little bit of time and extra time there because I think it had to obtain an IP address for each unit. What I'm going to do is I'm going to drive to my local club where I've got a site-to-site VPN connected from here at home. I'm going to drop off the RF deck connected to the antenna there into the network. Going to drive all the way back here to home, and I'm going to see if I can get this to connect to this over the internet. So I've set up the RF deck here at our club rooms. So that is good to go. I plugged it into our network. I did a test here with the control head and that works. So now I'm going to head home, connect over the VPN and see if I can connect to it. I've set up some routing rules. I'm connected with the site-to-site VPN. I've just got the control head now connected at home with the RF deck at the club rooms. Let me turn it on. I'll put in some static forwarding rules in the IP address rules, and it doesn't connect. I did go in and check my network settings, and I did have to enable the different segment and enter the segment settings. It still wouldn't connect, but funny enough, I logged into the remote ends router and I can't see that the RF deck is getting an IP address. So something might have gone funny when I left the club rooms at the remote site. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back there and see if I can get it going. So I've just come back to the club and plugged in the remote head. I didn't do anything else different, and it just connected straight away. Then what was interesting too was it obtained an IP address as soon as the remote head obtained an IP address, but the RF deck didn't obtain an IP address, which I thought was interesting. So it wasn't getting any IP address at all. So it kind of makes me think that what happens is, if you watch when you fire up the controller, you'll see that the RF deck is currently in a standby mode. If you turn on the controller, that turns on. That must then send a signal, as you can see there, and then bang, it switches itself on. And I think that that's being done probably over layer 2. And the problem is that that can't be done, or it's not being done, over my VPN connection. So it's later on in the day now, and 20 meters has just started to open up. So I wanted to show you sort of the waterfall and the responsiveness of everything under these conditions when there's actually stations properly on the air. And you just see the waterfall, just to me, seems a little bit more responsive compared to the 7610 or the 7300. Just seems to be too, like, maybe it's just my ear, or maybe it's just the current conditions at the moment. But the receiver sounds really, really nice in this. Like, these speakers are not sort of that big, and they're in this remote head, which I thought might have made them sound a bit sort of hollow. But let me just find a station and see what you mean.
Yeah, if I hear you on again, I'll ask them in the weekend, and I'll take note of it. If I hear you again, I'll let you know.
Yeah, roger on that. Okay, it's interesting because when I went looking around, I've had mine for about 2 years. The only place I could buy it from, because they used to be made in Italy.
Sounds very good. The filtering in this, I think, is making a difference at my QTH2, because whilst I've still got some interfering signals, the band just seems a lot cleaner and a lot quieter as well. That might just be sort of a not a very accurate scientific test, but just tuning around the band, I've heard lots of weak signals, and I haven't really sort of done a side-by-side comparison with the 7610 because I've only got sort of one antenna. I could sort of loop the receive out and everything like that, but I think just having a look at this radio seems to be very, very nice, easy to operate. Couple of little differences, but with the key difference that you can remote the head away and be able to operate this throughout the house or somewhere else in the house, potentially off-site via your local area network. So I couldn't get the controller to connect to the RF deck over VPN, and it kind of puzzled me a little bit. So I installed Wireshark real quickly and put in just captured the network to just have a look and see what's going on here. This MAC address here is showing information about what's happening with the RF deck. Then it's saying that this IP, which is a private IP address, 169.254.218.238, is at that MAC address, which is the RF deck. Then it's saying who has this one, tell this one, and who has this one, tell this one. So I'm not exactly sure what a lot of this means. Here is what the RF as the remote head looks like. So obviously here I've got a DHCP address, which is an IP address on my network, and then it kind of got told that this address, which is the RF deck, is at this MAC address via a broadcast packet. So yeah, which kind of is a little bit annoying, because I gather that means that it's not going to work over a VPN connection unless you can find some way of sending that traffic. I'm just speculating because I'm not sure without looking in more depth on the network side of things. Maybe it's some sort of layer 2 send packet that's being sent to it, which is not operating over the VPN connection that I had running here. You probably might have different results over your potential connection that you've got. Definitely over a point-to-point link, like a transparent bridge between one side of your network and the RF deck, maybe at the remote end. It could be several kilometers, as long as they're line of sight. then that should definitely work and you'll be able to use that. I don't think that... I wanted to sort of test the latency, because the latency over the VPN connection that I had is something like 30 milliseconds or something like that, which would have been interesting to see how the radio handled it. I don't really have any other way of testing that. I don't have a point-to-point link that I can stick this at the end of to test readily available. I do have a couple, but not readily available. But in any case, I think that it would work. My latency here over the local area, over the LAN, is like less than a millisecond. So, and point-to-point links, you can get 1.5, 2 milliseconds. So anyway, interesting results on trying to connect remotely. On my channel, I've done quite a few different reviews of Icom radios, such as the 7760. Here in the shack, I actually use the 7610 as my main radio. I've also got the 9700, 7300, 705, other Icom radios. If you want to see a review of those, then there is a playlist over here that you can watch. Also, subscribe to my channel for future reviews, and I hope that you enjoy your 7760 if you end up getting one.